Welcome to Story Weaver. In a world high above the clouds, there stood a grand castle. The castle was home to two characters, a young prince named Alexander and his loyal friend and advisor, a wise wizard named Merlin. They lived a peaceful life in the castle, surrounded by the clouds and with a beautiful view of the world below. One day, an evil sorcerer named Morgath appeared in the kingdom. He was determined to take over the castle and rule the land with an iron fist. Morgath had powerful magic at his disposal and soon launched an attack on the castle. Alexander and Merlin stood on the castle walls, ready to defend their home. The prince held a sword in one hand and a shield in the other, while Merlin brandished his staff, which glowed with a bright light. "We must defend the castle at all costs," shouted Alexander, determined to protect his home. "Indeed, your highness," replied Merlin. "We must use all of our wit and skill to defeat this evil sorcerer." Morgath began his attack, launching bolts of dark energy towards the castle. Alexander and Merlin were ready, deflecting each attack with their weapons. The battle was fierce and lasted for hours, but in the end, Alexander and Merlin emerged victorious. "We have done it," exclaimed Alexander, breathing heavily. "Yes, we have," replied Merlin, a look of pride on his face. "But we must remain vigilant, for Morgath will not give up easily. He will be back, and we must be ready to face him again." And so, the two friends stood guard over the castle, watching for any sign of the evil sorcerer's return. They knew that their battle with Morgath was far from over, but they were determined to protect their home and the kingdom they loved. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Alexander and Merlin stood vigilant, waiting for Morgath's return. But as time passed, the prince began to grow restless. He missed the adventures he used to have and longed to explore the world below the clouds. One day, he approached Merlin with his request. "Merlin, I must go on a quest. I need to see the world and have some new experiences." Merlin was hesitant. "Your Highness, it's not safe. Morgath is still out there, and he's determined to defeat us. If you leave the castle, you'll be putting yourself in great danger." "I understand the risks," replied Alexander, "but I cannot simply sit here and do nothing. I need to see the world, to experience it for myself." Merlin sighed, knowing that he couldn't deny the prince his request. "Very well, your highness. But you must take this with you," he said, handing Alexander a magical amulet. "This amulet will protect you from Morgath's magic. It will give you the strength you need to face any challenges that come your way." And so, Alexander set out on his quest. He traveled far and wide, visiting new lands and meeting new people. He encountered danger at every turn, but with the amulet's power, he was able to defeat Morgath's minions and continue on his journey. Years passed, and Alexander became a legendary hero, known for his bravery and strength. He returned to the castle, proud of all that he had accomplished. But little did he know, Morgath had been watching his every move. The sorcerer was determined to destroy Alexander once and for all. He approached the castle, ready to launch his final attack. Merlin stood ready, waiting for the prince's return. When Alexander arrived, the two of them stood together on the castle walls, prepared to face Morgath and his minions. The battle between Alexander, Merlin, and Morgath was unlike anything the kingdom had ever seen. Morgath approached the castle, his minions by his side, ready to launch his final attack. Alexander and Merlin stood on the castle walls, their weapons at the ready. The battle began with bolts of dark energy flying through the air towards the castle. Alexander and Merlin expertly deflected each attack with their weapons, but Morgath was relentless. He continued to press forward, determined to destroy the prince and take over the kingdom. The two friends were holding their own, but Morgath was growing stronger by the minute. Suddenly, the sorcerer unleashed a massive wave of dark magic, and Alexander and Merlin were thrown backwards. They landed hard on the ground, their weapons clattering to the ground beside them. Morgath approached, a cruel smile on his face. "You are no match for me," he sneered. Alexander and Merlin scrambled to their feet, their weapons in hand. They knew that this was the moment they had been preparing for, and they were determined to defeat the evil sorcerer once and for all. The two friends fought with all their might, their swords clashing against Morgath's dark magic minions. The tide of the battle seemed to turn with each passing moment, as Alexander and Merlin's strength increased and Morgath's began to fade. Finally, the moment arrived. Alexander and Merlin stood back to back, their swords at the ready. Morgath approached, a look of triumph on his face. "This is the end for you," he snarled. "Not so fast," replied Alexander, a fierce look in his eyes. The prince and the wizard launched themselves at Morgath, their magic-infused swords clashing against his dark magic in a spectacular display of power. The air was filled with the sound of metal striking metal, as the three of them fought in a battle that would determine the fate of the kingdom. It was a battle that lasted for what felt like an eternity. It seemed as if Morgath was winning. But then, something strange began to happen. The amulet that Merlin had given to Alexander started to glow with an intense light, and suddenly, the prince's power increased tenfold. And in the end, Alexander emerged victorious. The sorcerer and his minions disappeared in a puff of smoke, and the kingdom was safe once again. Alexander and Merlin stood victorious, their weapons at their sides. They had saved the kingdom and defeated the evil sorcerer, and they would be remembered as heroes for generations to come. Years passed, and Alexander and Merlin lived out their days in peace and prosperity. The kingdom was flourishing, and the prince was hailed as a hero by all who lived there. But little did anyone know, Morgath's dark magic was not truly gone. It was merely lying dormant, waiting for the right moment to emerge once again. One day, a strange and powerful energy began to stir in the kingdom. The people grew uneasy, and whispers of dark magic began to spread. Alexander and Merlin were the first to realize that something was wrong. They felt the energy growing stronger with each passing day, and they knew that they had to act quickly. They gathered a team of the bravest warriors in the kingdom and set out to investigate the source of the dark energy. They traveled to the far reaches of the kingdom, facing danger at every turn. But finally, they arrived at the source of the energy, a dark and sinister tower that rose high into the sky. Alexander and Merlin approached the tower, their weapons at the ready. They could feel the power of Morgath's dark magic growing stronger with each step, and they knew that they were in for the fight of their lives. They entered the tower, and what they found inside was beyond anything they could have imagined. Morgath was there, his dark magic more powerful than ever before. He had been waiting for their arrival, and he was ready to destroy them once and for all. The battle was fierce and intense, as Alexander and Merlin fought against Morgath and his minions. The prince and the wizard were holding their own, but they knew that they couldn't keep up the fight forever. Just when all hope seemed lost, something strange happened. The amulet that Merlin had given to Alexander started to glow with an intense light. The prince felt this power before, and he realized that the amulet was giving him the strength he needed to defeat Morgath once and for all. With a cry of triumph, Alexander plunged his sword into Morgath's heart, destroying the sorcerer once and for all. The tower crumbled to the ground, and the dark magic that had been threatening the kingdom was gone forever. Alexander and Merlin emerged from the ruins, their weapons at their sides. They were hailed as heroes once again, their bravery and strength having saved the kingdom from the forces of darkness. And so, Alexander and Merlin lived out the rest of their days in peace, their legend growing with each passing generation. They would always be remembered as the heroes who defeated Morgath and saved the kingdom from the forces of darkness.